All right, let's deep dive this topic with a guy himself who was breaking all the details. Shams, thanks for joining us. You heard, Brad Stevens, and I'm sure you saw that sound or heard it before. He doesn't want to break up the chemistry of this group. But now, even if they don't make this trade, it is out there that they were looking at Kevin Durant. So what is the latest in trade talks between the Brooklyn Nets and the Boston Celtics?
So for Boston, it's been pretty slow developing when it comes to the Kevin Durant sweepstakes. At the outset of Kevin Durant's trade request on June 30th, you had teams like the Suns, the Heat, the Raptors really emerge at the forefront. But throughout those conversations, there really hasn't been a deal that makes sense for the Nets. They've set a very high price threshold for a Kevin Durant trade. So this is one of the best players in the world today, a guy that's a two-time champion, a guy that's won 2 NBA championships, arguably, will be a Hall of Famer. And so there's obviously a high asking price that the Nets have set. And so far, no one has really met it. And I think over the last couple weeks, 2-3 weeks, you've seen I've heard the Celtics have emerged as a real threat, and they have the pieces potentially to put together a deal. And I don't think that this is something that's going to be imminent. Deal could take some time to develop if there's a deal at all. But right now, the sides aren't really necessarily close. There is a deal here to be had. But right now, the Celtics are not as inclined to trade a guy like Marcus Smart along with draft picks with a guy like Jaylen Brown. In their mind, if you're going to be trading multiple key rotation players to go get Kevin Durant, does that really take you to that next level? These are all questions that Brad Stevens, that front office, will have to analyze. And any front office that has the pieces that Boston has, that has the flexibility they have to see what's out there. And Kevin Durant is a guy that any team would want to see if they can acquire.
I do find it odd that the Celtics have emerged as a serious threat in terms of acquiring Kevin Durant when we just heard, Brad Stevens at the top of the block talk about the fact that, it's a very delicate situation, the chemistry of this team and how close they've gotten to an NBA title this past season. But Shams, the one thing I found interesting was the inclusion of Marcus Smart. How much of an immovable object is Marcus Smart in this situation when it comes to the Celtics pursuing Kevin Durant?
He's obviously Defensive Player of the Year on the floor. He means a lot to them there, but especially off the court, the culture and leadership that Marcus Smart has brought. I think you can't. It goes beyond stats. You can't really put a numerical value on what he brings to the table. So there's no question they want Marcus Smart to be the starting point guard. The Celtics do on a team that potentially has Kevin Durant. You want to have Marcus Smart, Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum, Robert Williams, Al Horford, the guys that they have, the depth that they have. You want to have Marcus Smart on that team. But if Brooklyn is dead set on getting Marcus Smart in any type of a potential package with Jaylen Brown, as well as draft picks and potentially another player, clearly the price is set. And so if there's not going to be movement from Brooklyn side as far as acquiescing and lowering maybe their ask, or Boston coming up and saying, we can't miss out on Kevin Durant, he changes the game for us. There very well could not or might not be a deal. But there is a framework of something here. But which side ultimately ends up deciding that they want to give a little bit more than they might right now, we'll see what happens. But listen, there's 2 months before the start of training camp. That's basically the unofficial trade deadline right now of the offseason.
Shams, you talked about the fact that the Celtics are probably in the best position with the best pieces to offer Brooklyn a competitive package. But is there any other team that could give the Celtics a run for their money and go after Kevin Durant and actually land him?
Right now, I would really look at Toronto and Miami, but Toronto without Scottie Barnes in the deal, and I'm told that is not a player that they want to move or have shown any desire to move in even a deal for Kevin Durant. So, you have them and that package of, different guys that you can put together on that roster, whether it be Pascal Siakam or OG Anunoby. It would appear to be less appealing than what the Celtics could provide. I mean, this is a team that just went to the NBA Finals. It's tried, it's proven. It's a young core that's grown year after year. And on the other side in Miami, they do have a guy in Bam Adebayo that would be tremendously valuable to the Brooklyn Nets. But because of Ben Simmons being on the roster, having 2 max rookie extension guys, they're not able to have both of them on the roster. So that deal just becomes tricky. And from Miami's standpoint, do you want to have do you want to bring in Kevin Durant and you don't have Bam Adebayo? That somewhat defeats the purpose of taking you to that next level, as far as competing for a championship. So there's not really a clear path to a deal for Kevin Durant right now. So when you look at the marketplace, the Celtics have the pieces. They probably right now have the best deal on the board, but it's not a deal that Brooklyn is willing to do at this moment.
You mentioned that unofficial trade deadline for September for when these talks could really be coming to a close for Kevin Durant. But I want to take it back. When did the Celtics really kind of get into this conversation? Was it initially when Kevin Durant said he wanted to be a free agent, was asking for a trade out of Brooklyn? Or is this something that simmered over time once, the Celtics got to notice that, hey, maybe these other teams, they don't have what we have to offer for a player like KD?
As soon as Kevin Durant asked out on the eve of free agency on June 30th, all 29 teams reached out to the Brooklyn Nets and expressed a level of interest. And that included the Celtics. Every team in the league did. Anytime a player like Kevin Durant gets on the market, you do your due diligence, you analyze, does that player make sense? And you express a level of interest. But talks didn't really pick up any type of esteem or really offers given by either side until really the last 2 or 3 weeks. And that's really the point, really in the last week and a half, when there was, some semblance of a conversation, of a framework, of something that could be potentially possible. But throughout this month, it's not like the Celtics were a team that's been going back and forth. There really hasn't been much back and forth because at this point, the Celtics have, made an offer. The Nets are where they are at. And we'll see over these next 2 months, Amina, as the unofficial trade deadline of the offseason looms closer and closer.
Shams, with Jaylen Brown's name being sort of, officially brought up in these talks, there are sort of conflicting ideas of whether or not Brown is happy in Boston. We've heard about him liking tweets where he's being unfairly treated here. But then we also see today from a local reporter, Mark Murphy, saying, no, Jaylen Brown loves Boston. What are you hearing about Jaylen Brown and him wanting to be a Boston Celtic for the long run?
I don't have any clarity on either which way. Obviously he's under contract with the Celtics for 2 more years, and I haven't heard anything about any type of displeasure that he's had with the organization. Overall over these last 2-3 years, I think you've seen a lot of growth in the organization when it comes to Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart. Just a couple of years ago in the bubble, they had some very testy moments. So for them to go from that to being a couple wins away from an NBA Finals championship, I think speaks a lot to the growth of the organization. But I think overall, this is a team that I think has grown a lot, has a lot more growth potentially to do. But I haven't heard of any significant displeasure from Jaylen Brown, any type of requests or anything like that from his side as of right now.
Everyone here in Boston has seen the picture of Jaylen Brown and Kyrie Irving and Kanye West, and people cannot stop talking about it here in Boston. But Shams, just maybe how much does Kyrie play into maybe luring Jaylen Brown away from Boston, maybe to Brooklyn? Does he play any part in that at all?
Kyrie Irving is on an expiring contract. I think he's just focused on playing out the season, and he's really, there's not really a leverage position right now. He's not there's not a trade request or anything like that. He's finishing, his contract out, and that means right now he's going to be a Brooklyn Net, and so he I don't think anyone really has the power in Brooklyn to try to go get Jaylen Brown or recruit him as of right now.